There is something innately terrifying about the idea of witches. Perhaps it is the fact that they have such a strong historical significance for many areas of the world. Our minds are often brought back to the Salem witch trials that happened in Massachusetts during the 1600s. We think of women being burned at the stake and the paranoia that seemed to devour each and every member of the small Puritan society. The fascination that American people had with witches more than 300 years ago was not an isolated incident. Many people in various cultures are still wary of the idea of witchcraft and dark magic. The people of Mexico have legends of witches and worshipped dark saints. They teach their children to live in fear of the evil women who seek to take them away from their families, where they will never be seen again. Most of these people brush these stories off as being tales made up to scare children, but what if there is some truth to these tales? Witchcraft is a broad term that has been used by religious organizations to refer to any sort of ritual or belief that is closely aligned to paganism, an ancient religion that worshipped various different gods. While some of the pagan beliefs involve the invocation of the dark and merciless gods, there are also aspects of paganism that are found in everyday life. A lot of the widely celebrated holidays were originally pagan holidays that have been updated and given a new meaning. Halloween was one of the most celebrated pagan holidays and still retains some of the original mystery and intrigue that defined the holiday many centuries ago. While many aspects of paganism, and therefore witchcraft, have made it into societal norms of the world today, there are still some that continue to practice the more unholy aspects of the ancient practices. Today, we will be diving into an eyewitness encounter of a group of people that encountered some of these practitioners of ancient magic. In South Carolina, in the year 1991, Ken Fisher and his new family were looking for something more in life. Ken had just recently married his wife Linda, and with his new marriage, brought a new family together. Linda had a son, Matthew, that was living with her at the time, and Ken was eager to make a good impression on his new stepson. While these three will be the main focus of the account, the family also had 6 younger children living with them at the time. Ken had been an insurance salesman for years in the southern part of the United States and was always able to provide for himself and his family. After a while of selling insurance, the industry began to dry up, and Ken was worried about his ability to support his new family. He decided to pursue a new career, one that would sustain him both financially and spiritually. Ken decided he was going to go through seminary so he could become a preacher. He had been a faithful member of a Christian church for his entire life, and he thought it was his time to join the ministry. Linda was supportive of this new direction that Ken was taking and was even eager to help him on his journey towards becoming a pastor. While Linda was supportive of her new husband, she knew that the path that he was on would not be an easy one. Although Ken's job as an insurance salesman wasn't bringing in as much money as it used to, it would still pay him more than he would making while he was studying to be a preacher. The family decided that it was worth the risk. They knew they could afford to get by with a little bit less than they had, and Ken's ambition to be a preacher seemed to be really good for him. Due to the high cost of living where they were currently located at the time, the family decided to relocate to South Carolina, where life was a little less expensive. They were sad to leave their old life behind, but the family was confident that an even more promising life awaited them in South Carolina. They packed their things into their station wagon and headed for their new life. While both of the parents were eager to get on their life in South Carolina, Matt was having a harder time with the transition. He was a teenager at the time and did not want to leave his school and all of his friends behind. Moving always seems to be tougher on teenagers. Matt had just carved out a place for himself in his school and was beginning to enjoy the circle of friends that he had made. He wanted to support his stepdad in whatever he did, but he wished that what he did wouldn't bring them so far away from everything he knew. Matt was quiet about his feelings, however. He knew that he had very little control over the situation and thought that vocalizing his opinion would just make things worse. As the family drove to their new house, Matt tried to stay positive about the change. He liked the nature around where they were at and could see himself fitting in nicely with the people that he saw walking down the street. As the family started to approach their new home, Matt started feeling more and more hopeful. The family pulled into the driveway and looked at their new house. They were all stunned by what they saw. The house was beautiful. It had a porch that wrapped around the entire house and a big yard. It was truly a beautiful southern home that looked like it jumped straight out of a history book. The family was excited to settle into this new home, and they loved their old place, but they were shocked that they got such a nice deal on such an extravagant house. Ken looked at his wife and smiled. They were both in agreement that the house was perfect. Even Matt was blown away by the house. He was eager to get himself settled into what seemed to be a nice new place for him to live. The entire family was ecstatic. Their expectations had been completely surpassed, and they were now more than willing to accept whatever their new life in South Carolina had to offer them. When the family arrived, they were met by the realtor. She welcomed them with a firm handshake and a warm smile. Ken started walking towards the house and was surprised to see another family standing in the doorway. The previous family that had stayed in the house was still in the process of moving out. Linda was a little bothered that they would not be able to move their stuff in all the way at first, but she put on a nice face and decided to make the most of what they had been given. After all, if they were able to get such a nice house for such a low price, then she would be willing to put up with whatever life had to throw at her. Matt was a little more skeptical of the house. To him, the unusually low price of the house means that something had to be wrong with it. He decided to make the most of the situation, but he also made sure to keep an eye on any possible problems that the house may have had. As the family began to move their things into the house, the previous renters and the realtor offered to help them. They gladly accepted their help, and all the people at the house began to move the items from the car to the house. While Matt was taking a look around the house, he noticed something strange. There was a door on the side of the house that had a large padlock on it. He knew that his family was only renting the house, but he still found it odd that there was such a large lock on a door that should have been available to them. It looked like there was something else to the house than what the family had decided to rent. The realtor was taking Linda on a tour of the house. Everything seemed normal for the first few minutes of the tour, but then the realtor started listing off rules that the family needed to follow if they were going to stay there. Linda was used to normal rules that came with renting a house. No pets, no smoking, no repainting, things like that. However, the rules that the realtor had for them were a lot stranger than the rules they were used to following. As the two women reached the living room of the house, a large rose-colored rug caught Linda's eye. It was worn out and faded and looked like it had been there since the house was first constructed. The realtor then told Linda that they were not to move or cover up the rug. The owners of the house were very insistent that the rug stay exactly where it was. Linda was interested in why she had to follow such strict rules, but she decided not to press the realtor further. When the owner of the house passed Matt in the hallway, he decided to use this opportunity to ask her about the padlocked room. He was expecting a usual response. Maybe it was a storage room, or maybe it contained the water heater. The lady looked at him with a shocked impression. She told him that the locked room was the room that her uncle had committed suicide in. Matt was disturbed at this revelation. If the room didn't feel quite right to him before, it definitely didn't now. The woman told him that they kept the room locked out of respect for her deceased uncle. Matt wasn't feeling so confident about the house at this point, and he did not like the idea of sleeping in a house that seemed to have such a strange feeling around it. While Linda was out in the yard, she went to go take a look at the shed behind the house. She noticed that there was a large rock that sat in front of the shed door. Wanting to get in, Linda started pushing on the rock, and the realtor quickly ran over and yelled at Linda, telling her to stop messing with the rock. She told Linda that the family was not allowed to go into the shed, and that rock should remain in front of the door at all times. Linda was surprised at the panicked tone in the lady's voice. She thought about asking more questions, but at this point, she was done hearing about all the rules that the house had, and she just wanted to go get settled in with her family. After all, the house was nice, and she knew that she could handle living with a few odd rules, so as long as they were still getting such a good deal. Matt decided to speed things along by helping the old tenants move their things out of the house and into their moving trucks. After they had moved everything that the previous family had in the house, the family headed out in their truck. As they were leaving, Matt said goodbye to the mother of the previous family, wished her a safe journey to wherever they were headed to, and the lady looked back at Matt and told his family to be careful. She said that house was full of death. Then she drove away, and the family never saw them again. These words sent shivers down Matt's spine. The first night that they spent in the house was a rough one. He couldn't sleep, and he definitely could not stop thinking about the ominous message that the woman had left with him. He was lying in his bed, and he started to hear a squeaking sound coming from the door to his room. He looked over to see the door handle twisting back and forth, and Matt knew that nobody else was awake in the house, so he couldn't imagine who was trying to get into his room at the time. He watched the handle twist back and forth for about a minute, and the door just flew open. Matt, who jumped, looked back at the doorway, but there was nobody there. And although the door had flung open, it stopped before it hit the wall, like someone had grabbed it. Matt was waiting for somebody to come through the doorway. Nothing had ever come through. However, he got up out of bed and walked towards the doorway. He prepared himself to see someone or something standing in the hall outside the room. When he walked into the hall, he could not see anything. He began walking through the hall, and a sinking feeling began to fill his head. He didn't know how, but he knew that there was something behind him. Matt quickly turned around and saw a flash of something behind him. It was only there for a second, so he could not get a good look. But Matt was almost certain that he had just seen a woman standing in the hallway behind him. Matt didn't know what to do. He couldn't just tell his parents that he thought the house was haunted. He didn't want to scare them away from the nice house they were in. Besides, he knew that he sounded crazy. He decided to keep what he had seen to himself. He went back to bed and fell asleep. While the main focus of this account has been Linda, her husband Ken, and her son Matt, the family was a large one. There were 7 children that lived in the house along with Ken and Linda. Most of them were little, with the 2 oldest being the only teenagers at the house. Linda had her work cut out for her when it came to taking care of all the kids. There were a lot of chores to handle, but she was happy to do them and support her family. During one of the days that the family was staying in the house, the kids had all gone outside to kick a soccer ball around. They had been having a good time, enjoying the nice weather, when one of the kids kicked the ball high into the air. The ball fell straight into a hole on the roof of the shed. Ken had not heard the warning that the realtor had given his wife, so he began to move the rock in front of the door. Linda ran outside, screaming and shouting at her husband, warning him not to move the rock. Ken carried on and finally rolled out the rock from the door, and as soon as he did, this large gust of wind came rushing from the shed and flung the door open, and the family could not believe what they were seeing. The gust from the shed blew back several members of the family. Linda looked at the open door of the shed and felt that they had just released something that should have stayed locked in the shed. That night, Linda was sitting in a rocking chair in the living room. The rest of the family had gone to sleep, and she was trying to relax by knitting something for one of her children. She got an urge to check to see if the front door was locked. The family was far away from any other house, but given the events that had happened earlier in the day, she knew she would feel a lot safer if the door was locked. When she walked over to the front door, she saw something out in the yard. She could see the silhouette of a man. He was hanging from the tree in the front yard. As he swayed back and forth in the wind, Linda could not believe her eyes, and now she knew there was definitely something wrong with the house. She decided to investigate further and walked out the front door to the tree in the yard. She then got to the tree, and the man was gone. Linda went back inside the house and tried to rationalize what she had just seen. She just decided to go to bed and try to forget that anything ever happened. As the days went on, Ken began struggling balancing his family life with his studies. He would be gone for almost 12 hours out of the day to study and attend seminary. This began to weigh on the large family, as taking care of 7 kids was a monumental responsibility for Linda. Matt had started to resent his stepfather for being gone so much of the day. He started taking on responsibilities that would usually go to Ken, such as taking care of the kids and doing chores around the house. As the family started to clean out more and more of the house, they came across strange things. One day, Linda was cleaning out a room in the back of the house. She looked into one of the dressers in the room, and inside, she found the bones of several different animals. She didn't know what to make of this finding, but she did not feel good about it. Several other strange occurrences happened to their family during their stay in the house. One day, Matt was walking around the perimeter of the house when he saw a little girl standing in one of the windows. Assuming it was his sister, he waved at her and she waved back. Continuing his walk around the house, he saw that same sister that he thought he had just seen inside playing in the yard. Matt went back into the house and his curiosity got the best of him. He wanted to see the inside of that room that he saw the girl in. He went up to the room and did not see anybody in the room. Matt was a little freaked out by this experience, but tried to come up with some sort of explanation that would make sense in his head. The family seemed determined to make the best out of their seemingly haunted house and chose to ignore what many people would have seen as warning signs. One day, while the rest of the family was away, Matt invited one of his friends over to the house. The two decided to get into the locked room in the house, and Matt's friend James had brought tools with him to get rid of the lock. The lock came off rather easily, and the two took a deep breath before they opened the door. When they opened the door, a blast of cold air came out of the room. It was a hot day outside, so this didn't seem to make any sense to the two friends. When Matt and James stepped into the room, it was like walking into a time capsule. The room looked untouched and how it must have looked when the previous resident had died. As the two walked through the room, they could smell the scent of fresh cigarette smoke in the room. No one in the house smoked, so this did not make sense to the two boys. As the boys investigated the room, they heard a loud crashing coming from upstairs. Now, determined to investigate all the secrets that the house had to offer, the two decided to head to the source of the noise. When the two climbed up the stairs, they felt a chill come over their bodies. All the doors in the hallway were closed. This was odd, as the family always kept them open. James, wanting to be the voice of reason, said they may have been shut and slammed from a draft in the house. As the two continued down the hallway, they heard the same crashing sound again. When they turned around, all of the doors in the hallway were now open. James could not come up with a valid explanation for why the doors had flung open. The two decided to stop their investigation, and Matt felt that the door that they had opened was not to keep the family from entering the room, but rather to keep something inside of the room from entering the rest of the house. That night, Linda was enjoying her quiet time in the rocking chair in the living room, as she often did. The air in the room never seemed to stand still. There was always something that made her feel on edge as she tried to relax. She could feel a tension in the air as if somebody was watching her. She walked around the house, decided to check on all the doors, and while she was walking through the house, she smelt that same cigarette smoke coming from the upper level of the house. She climbed the stairs and followed the scent of the smoke to her own room. She peered inside and saw a man standing in the window smoking a cigarette. She gasped and flipped on the lights, and the man was gone. Matt had heard his mother gasp and went to find her. The two decided to sit in the kitchen and finally have a discussion about what they had seen. When Linda told Matt what she had seen, he could hardly believe it. Matt had smelt the same smoke in the locked room earlier and was now sure that what he had seen and what he had been dealing with was real. He told his mom about his previous encounters in the house, and the two were both relieved to not be alone in this horrifying ordeal. As the two discussed what they had seen and what they were going to do about it, they heard the sound of glass shattering right next to them. A glass had fallen from the shelf next to them and shattered on the ground. They looked at the glass in disbelief before they had time to process what they had seen. More glasses began to fly off the shelves around them, and the two took cover underneath the table. They were under attack. As the glasses rained down around them, they tried to come to grips with what they were witnessing. Upstairs, one of the daughters of the family had just woken up from a terrifying nightmare. She had seen an old lady with white hair in her dreams and had felt more scared than she had ever in her entire life. After the glasses stopped crashing to the ground, Linda went upstairs to comfort her daughter. The strange experiences and hauntings that the family had seen were beginning to weigh on Linda. She did not feel safe in the house and was worried that whatever was in the house was affecting her children at this point. Matt was seeing his mother unravel and knew that he had to step up to protect his family. He decided to look for answers as to what was inside their house. So he went to the local library to look through years and years of local newspaper, hoping to find something that would illuminate him on the history of the house. As he looked through the newspapers, he found one article about a man that had hung himself in the front yard. He began to find more and more about this house. There was a little girl who had died from falling down the stairs. Could that have been the girl that he had seen in the window? The more that Matt read about this house, the worse it seemed to get. He found another article that talked about another suicide that had happened just recently. How could there have been so many accidents and suicides in this home? Matt began to think that there was some sort of curse on the house. Matt and Linda both decided to tell Ken about what they had seen. He believed them and began to feel guilty about his absence in the house. He was determined to stick around and be the father that he knew he could be for his family. This new determination to his family was greatly appreciated, but it didn't do anything to slow down the strange occurrences in the house. One night, when Matt was shaving, he saw something moving around in the sink. As he peered down into the bowl, he saw a large, hairy spider crawling out of the sink. Matt, completely terrified of spiders and could not believe his eyes, he was paralyzed with fear as he saw more and more spiders crawling out of the sink. There must have been almost 20 of them crawling around the bathroom, and at this point, Matt was convinced there was something in the house that was trying to harm him. He ran out of the room and out onto the front porch. As he grappled with what to do with the house and all of the terrifying occurrences he had seen, he decided that it was time to take action against the house. He went to the local pastor, had told him what was going on. The pastor told him that he needed more time to anoint the house to cleanse it from the evil spirits. He gave Matt a bottle of oil and instructed him on how to anoint the house to ward off the dark spirits that they had seen. Matt was told that he had to anoint every member of his family before he started to work on the house itself. After each member of the family had been anointed, he began spreading the holy oil on every entrance and exit that the house had. They put the oil on every door and the window that the house had, while Linda read from the Bible. They had taken care of every point of entrance in the house except for 2. Matt knew that he had to anoint the chimneys as well. He climbed up a ladder, got onto the roof. He walked towards the first chimney and spread the oil on it. Matt would have to walk across the pitch of the roof to get to the second chimney. So he slowly started to walk over. As Matt made his way over to the second chimney, he felt a pressure come over his entire body. He knew that the house did not want him to finish the anointing, and he could feel it, trying to stop him. Matt noticed something on his arm, and he heard a buzzing sound coming from all around him. He was surrounded by hornets. He had no idea where they had come from, and he tried to keep calm as he walked over to the other chimney. Matt was allergic to bees and was afraid that the hornet would sting him and seriously injure him. He made his way to the second chimney and spread the oil on it, securing every entrance and exit to the house. As he spread the oil, the hornets started stinging him all over. He panicked and stumbled around until he lost his footing and fell off the roof. He landed in the bushes on the side of the house and was thankfully relatively unharmed. Matt was thankful to be alive, and the family decided that it was time to leave the house behind. Ken and Linda quickly moved the family out of the house and to another house about an hour away. While they were happy to leave the house behind them, they knew that they were obligated to clean the house up before they left. Ken and Matt decided to head back to the house and clean it as quickly as they could. When Matt was sweeping the room with the big rug, he accidentally pulled up a corner of the rug. He saw some symbols on the ground and decided to investigate further. When Matt and Ken pulled the rug off the ground, they found something they would never forget. Carved into the ground was a large pentagram with strange runes and markings all over it. The two stopped cleaning the house right away and waited outside for the landlord to come. The landlord arrived in a silver Cadillac, and when the door of the car opened, a beautiful woman stepped out. She walked past Ken and Matt into the house, and the 2 other women stepped out of the car and waited for the first woman to return. When the first woman walked out of the house, she was furious. She demanded to know what the family had done to the house. They claimed that it was empty now, and that they would have to do something to get them to come back. Ken and Matt could not believe what they were hearing. As the woman left in their car, Matt thought that he recognized them. He could not prove it, but he felt that the woman in the car were the realtor, the previous tenant, and the owner of the house, except they all looked younger. The women drove off, and Matt and Ken headed back to their new home. Ken and Linda's family was happy to move on from what they had experienced in the house, and they lived the rest of their lives without any more significant paranormal encounters. As far as they could tell, the haunted house they had stayed in was the work of witches, and they maintain the truthfulness of their story to this day. Thank you all for going on this journey with me to discuss the strange and disturbing incident of this particular house. If any of you have had any experiences similar to what this family saw, then please share your stories with me in the comment section below, or simply send them to stories@whatlurksbeneath.com. If you enjoy this video, be sure to go ahead and hit that like button, or simply leave a comment below and let me know what you thought. Also, if you're new to the channel, be sure to go ahead and smack that subscribe button and keep your notifications on so that way YouTube will let you know every time I release a great new video. As always, guys, take care, and I will see you all in the next video.